My name is Skip Humphrey. I'm the Dean of the University of Arkansas Flint School of Public Service. And we are honored to host this program as part of our speaker series. This session on addiction investing is being live streamed on the Flint School website. So if anyone is interested in watching, please do that. Panelists are on television, so be aware. So we're honored to join with you and being part of this day for your life and welcome you. And I want to say a particular shout out to our friends at Heifer International, a great partner of ours to work with our students. And it is my pleasure now to introduce the person who needs absolutely no introduction to this crowd, because he is the managing director of the EA Global Group Foundation. And he has done a fabulous job. He continues to do great work. My good friend, Mark Brother.
Thank you very much, Skip, and thank all of you for being here. I'm probably getting tired of hearing so we have a great family. We're going to start off with a little background on this family. So part of the club of the FDA agreement was that we need to have a better and more effective financial funding system globally to move money from where it exists into companies and projects that can actually use the funding to deploy technologies and scale globally. Initially, our focus was mostly on pension and sovereign health funds, but there are a lot of other potential investments in this sort of thing, including an organization that was formed a few years ago called Mission Investors Exchange. And Mission Investors Exchange now is about 250 foundations that are looking to invest $100,000 in things that support their mission, one way or the other. And we actually have two of those foundation representatives here today, the Heifer Foundation and the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation. We also have on the panel some folks who can take that money and do great things with it. Seed fund and Root Capital. And then we have a gentleman who actually knows something about advising these endowments. And then we have a gentleman on the end who actually has some projects and develops projects that can actually use some of this funding. So I think we'll take it with a full spectrum here today. But I'm going to start in a very low-tech way because we've got a system failure. But Melanie Audette, who is a senior official with Mission Investors, is on our speakerphone with the cell line. Melanie, are you still there? Great, great. Well, if you would, Melanie, if you would, just spend a minute or two, or how long you can, kind of talking about how Mission Investors got started and what is its mission. process of learning. It's a very good first step, and we're delighted with what you all have done. No way we could go out and create mission investors. You've already done that, so we don't have to, but we can certainly be a good partner to mission investors and look forward to working together as we take this journey together. So thank you very much, and I know you've got another thing you have to do this afternoon, so we'll let you go. This has all been videotaped and webcast, so we'll catch up with it when we can. Thank you very much, Willy. Never fails in the technology conference and the technology failure associated with it. But, I think we got the message anyway. So our first panelist is Ardyth. Many of you know, he's head of the Heifer International Foundation. As we know, we're honored to be having this conference today. They do great work all over the world. And a big part of that is supporting the foundation can make. But they're also a member of mission investors. And Ardyth, if you could tell us, about a little bit about the foundation and why you're participating in mission investors. So,
I'm going to try to share a little bit of what Melanie shared because we are a member of the Mission Investors Exchange. So I get a question often. Why mission investing? And why is it important? And why do you want to be a part of the Mission Investors Exchange? And it's because we can come together and share what we're learning. There's a wide spectrum of over 250 foundations that are members of the Mission Investors Exchange. And that helps tremendously for those of us like Heifer Foundation that are just starting to look at mission investing beyond negative screens and how we do it. Because we can then work with folks that have been doing it longer and we can learn from them. And that's great. And then as we move along, we can have those others that come into that group. They have several meetings during the year that are very helpful to bring us together and have these conversations and how we can invest for reasonable returns and make the impact we want to see in the world. So that's what's exciting to me about being a member of the Mission Investors Exchange. I also will tell you a little bit about Heifer Foundation and where we're at in our journey. We are the foundation for Heifer International. We were created to build an endowment for their ongoing support. So we were going to have slides, which is fine if we don't. I'm very happy to just to talk and that way we can form an informal conversation around our work. Yes, good. The foundation is a foundation of around $105 million. 76 million of that is endowment assets that are being put to work to have returns to support Heifer's mission, which is to end hunger and poverty. So for me, the reason the foundation of Heifer should be doing mission investing is to support that mission. It's for that reasonable return because that return can then be used. But what's the real sweet spot and what we're working on now is how we can actually work through partners like a Seed or a Root Capital or others that are at the table to actually invest in those communities that we're working on the ground, whether that's in Mexico and helping break the chains of coffee farmers that are having to get their funds from coyotes, which means they're paying 8% interest per month in order to have working capital to pick their coffee. Then when they have to pay back, it's paid back in coffee at a price the coyotes set. So how can we help them by having investment funds available? In Kenya, maybe it's work that we're doing there with dairy production and with children homes. So there's a place that the farmers and those cooperatives can actually have a path to own those hubs and have more control over those market value chains that they're a part of. So that we're creating a pro-core wealth-creating value chain. So those agriculture farmers have that benefit. Or maybe it's here in Arkansas, and for those of you that were here last night, the meat came from one of the cooperatives that we actually work with here in Arkansas. And they're working right now to have their own meat processing facility so they can control how those processes are handled, and here again, that there's bigger value out of that. So the Foundation for Heifer International, if we can invest in any of those, that's wonderful because we've increased the impact and we're actually helping Heifer achieve the goal of our 2020 goal to lift 4 million families to a living wage. So I'm going to let it go at that and move on.
Already about some specific technologies that Heifer itself can potentially deploy, which will create a good business case for the technology company, which will make it an interesting investment opportunity for the foundation. So we look forward to exploring that further and some other big financial tools that the foundation can potentially invest in. Our next panelist, Andrea, Dobson, is CEO of the CFO of the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation. Now, I must tell you, there were 5 famous Rockefeller brothers, including Nelson, who was the vice president of the United States, and 4 of those, for some reason, stayed in New York, but Winthrop came to Arkansas, and he did wonderful things here. He's governor of Arkansas, and he worked with his brothers to do some great things to help Arkansas, and we're proud to be a Rockefeller state here. His son, Willy was the lieutenant governor of Arkansas, and his family lives on, and that's a lot of great things. So,
thank you so much. And as Art said, Winthrop Rockefeller had a huge and positive impact on our state when he landed here a little over 60 years ago. He continued his family tradition of philanthropy. His private vehicle was called the Rock Wind Fund. You can kind of figure out where that came from. After he passed away as a young man, his estate was left predominantly to charity, and there's a couple of us up here who have been beneficiaries of that, but his private philanthropy vehicle, the Rock Wind Fund, was renamed the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation. And the roots of our philanthropy are really in the social justice mission that Winthrop Rockefeller portrayed in his life. He is well known for many things that he did to benefit Arkansas, but perhaps most known for his strong stance on social justice and really bringing racial equity into the state and into the context of Arkansas One. Right now, we have roughly $120 million in our endowment, and the slide, one of 2 slides that are up there, really kind of gives you a sense of what we've done in terms of the impact space. We were early in program-related investing, which is philanthropy for taking a below market rate return on an investment in order to get a social return. And a number of the things that we have done in that realm include bringing capital into banks that will go into unbankable communities, taking dollars and when we've done this, we've had both successes and failures. So we invested actually in a theater that is still thriving, but could never pay the bills back. And at the same time, we invested with the Nature Conservancy of land, which has been held for posterity and that will return. Our philosophy in our impact investing really is wrapped up in who we are. And the mission of our foundation is to move the needle in Arkansas, increase prosperity in Arkansas through increasing educational attainment, strengthening communities, building the nonprofit infrastructure. So those are the things that we're working on, and when we start looking at investing in impact, those are the things that are core to why we do this. Much like what Ardyth said, their focus on hunger drives what they would be interested in investing. Our focus on Arkansas drives to a large extent what we would like to invest in, but we also recognize in the impact space that in order to get market rate returns, you can't be geographically constrained as the state of Arkansas. So we often look at something that's programmatically aligned as well as something that is going to invest in Arkansas. Most of our early investments were here in Arkansas. And when we look at whether or not we will invest, And those of you who were here this morning actually heard me ask a question about the community that's getting green housing in Baltimore. And I did live in Baltimore for 18 years, so I knew exactly where it was. And it used to be public housing, and it's a very low-income community. But my question was about local voice, and that's part and parcel to why we are doing impact investing, but also how we do it. We respect, and I like liberation and foundation, so I'm going to use some 4 R's this time. We respect the voice and ideas of the people in the communities where we want to partner. We do not want to dismiss that. And when you are the foundation with money, it's often easy for that power dynamic to get in the way. So reciprocity is very, very important. Creating a balanced relationship involves give and take on both sides. Clearly we have money. But the people in communities have ideas, they have the understanding of what's local, they know what the problems in their communities are, and they know the solutions. And so we need to act from a position of reciprocity. We also need to empower those local voices so that they use their local voices in meetings, in negotiations. So it's our responsibility to make sure that they are empowered to do that. And finally, when we're investing, we need to really put a high value on the relationships of the people who are there. And this is less of an issue in Arkansas, but certainly as we look at other spaces where we might be inclined to invest, recognizing that not only are there relationships amongst people, but particularly in other cultures, particularly indigenous cultures, there is a relationship among land and spirituality that needs to be respected when we're bringing technology and Western solutions to communities that do not have at their core Western thought. So that kind of drives how we think about it. I said to Bert earlier, when you start thinking about pulling together a bunch of foundations and creating a combined space, you run into the challenge that when you've met a foundation, you've met one foundation. We are so unique and diverse that sometimes it's challenging to get partners to co-invest into one fund. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but to a large extent we are our own worst enemies when we talk about trying to build capital together. In terms of the kinds of things that we have done, as you can see on the slides up there, we are really trying to invest in Arkansas. We have over $21.7 million in our portfolio right now that is either pure mission or, going back to our social justice hat, is invested in funds that have a diverse board of directors, that have diverse professionals, and by that I mean people of color and women in positions of power within those organizations. That's something that, because equity is very important to us, that we would see as mission aligned. We have created hundreds of jobs within Arkansas. Types of things that we've invested in, low-income housing in a rural community is a real challenge. Those of you who invested in real estate know that you need a certain number of units in order to make money. Well, in many communities in Arkansas, when the population is 200, a 100-unit is not going to work. So we've actually brought low-income housing through a real estate investment in municipal bonds that only has 24 units, which is appropriate for the size of the community that we're investing in. We've invested in rehabilitating lots, taking some of the commercial property in downtown Little Rock and turning it into something that's green and that's livable. Lots of our investments have been in loan funds in order to get capital into unbanked or poorly banked communities. So those are a couple of the things that we're doing. Let me see, she told me how to go to the next slide. Success. This kind of gives a picture, and it's really light, it's hard to see. But what I wanted to kind of focus on is we've got a return metrics over on one side, where we've got the axis where we can get a high return versus a below market return, and we are amongst those foundations who will put money in below market returns. We've got about $7 billion out there in below market return right now, and we have close-in programmatic alignment and direct Arkansas. So those are the things that we are balancing as we're looking at things, and we will invest in things any place on that. Obviously, the sweet spot is in the northwest corner. We don't always find that. But those are the kinds of things that we're thinking about when we're evaluating whether or not we should bring our money into an investment. Over the next 7 years or so, we'll probably be building out another $12 million of private investments. We hope that they are on the high market end, but they're really going to be aligned with sustainable development goals, and they're going to be aligned with our core values in terms of how it is that we do our funding. So with that, that's the back part.
Thank you so much. I tell you, these are two, so there's a foundation, there's another 248 foundations that are part of mission investors. So you can imagine that goes from the Gates Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and so on and so forth, the other Rockefeller foundations. So we're really delighted to be working with a whole other pool of potential investment capital to move these projects. And they have a lot more flexibility than typical pension and sovereign wealth fund does too, to be creative in what they do. Next is Bert who sort of helped set me on this mission for some reason. Bert is the chairman and CEO of the SEED funds, Small Enterprise Assistance Funds, which operate in about 30 or more developing countries around the world. They actually had a successful fund in Vietnam. It had some interesting investments in healthcare. Actually had one investment in a company that had 230 stores that sold diesel generators. And we're going back to them now to see if they would like to use the battery-powered control system that could save 70% of fuel and run those generators. And a little small world story. So Bert is also on the board, Pierre Ferrari, who is the CEO of Heifer International, who many of you met last night, is also on the board of directors of the SEED fund. So there's in a way, there's a SEED operation here in Little Rock when we get together outside of the Heifer building. So Bert, we want to talk about how SEED develops some things that might be actual investments for some of the 250 mission investor endowments.
Well, in general, I think this is a great day, and there's a lot of complexity that's being discussed very efficiently. I really like the comments of both Melanie and in terms of what their missions are, how important those missions are, how obviously they and other people who care about their mission are trying to use. Are you here? I'm sorry. Great. This was just so informal here. It was very nice to stand. Let me try to make it a little bit bigger. So I think it's a great day and a great forum to exchange what are some of the ways that people who care about their mission today do so using money that returns some return. Because I think it's obviously done now here that board users are very infinite. And so I think what's so interesting is how to employ technology, that's to say, how to invest in these missions. And it's yours in our case. We'll see believes in all our countries that we're dedicated to underserved markets to provide risk capital available that will provide growth primarily in jobs and primarily growth in lower skilled and skilled countries. Are all too frequently both and a lot of things. We are hopefully combining our presentation. So Mark, I think what we were formed in 1989 is a subsidiary of CARE, and that's how here we got linked up. CARE in those days was trying to be microfinance at 6% that kind of annual interest rate, was losing a lot of money to understand where it was going. One program officer by the name of Tom Gibson came and what became a lawyer at that stage. We were doing sovereign debt equity swaps to fund development. In those days, there was an excess of bank debts. They could contribute to a non-profit, and those proceeds could be exchanged in those currencies and various funds were done. We got the idea that there were very few in those days on the development side. We might have some micro, we might have some five-star hotels and large lands, but very little was actually used to fund entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs in local markets are the ones that keep things going. They're not going to move away. They don't have to stay in a five-star hotel. They do know what the local community needs are, and very much like what Andrea was talking about in Arkansas. So we actually started doing a sample investment in Costa Rica, and then the wall fell down in Berlin, and it took us all to Europe. So we are now now 28 years later. We have funds we have more than 36 funds in 30 countries, 27 offices globally. And our interest in the impact space is around $700 million cumulative investment. Typical investment size is about $1 million, can be a little bit lower in small countries. And what we found is an amazingly consistent growth rate, both in terms of employment, salaries, and turnover, and taxes. And those are the ones that we've been measuring since 2004. We find out that the smaller businesses grow employment around 60 to 70% in the first 3 years. And that their wages, because we get trained, will improve about 20% a year in dollar terms. Turnover increases about 25% in dollar terms. And at the end of the day, our return of capital to our investors turned out to be something like 1.7 to 2 times their capital. Reasonable, but I don't think it's necessarily going to make any hedge funds envy. And that's partly because of the small communities that we have. That really has led us to consider tech deployment. That's something that Vaart actually started way back when. Because a lot of the countries that we're in are off the beaten track. There's Kosovo's, there's Macedonia's, there's Colombia is no longer off the beaten track. But we set up a fund in 2005. It was a $20 million fund, and President Uribe himself introduced us because it was the first private equity fund in Colombia, Uzbekistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. Yeah. These are markets that are often not only neglected by capital, but often neglected by technology. So one of the interesting things that we talk about that drives people's lives forward, whether it's energy, whether it's health, whether it's food. There's a lot of productivity increasing things that can be done. And yet they're not being done because these markets are being ignored. The rights of the people in those markets to enjoy the benefits of technology development and the rights of those entrepreneurs. In fact, the desirability of entrepreneurs who stay make a difference in those countries we serve, and that's our primary goal. We've been doing so in the conventional I'm not sure buildings now because so I'll go through a little bit. Let me see. So 774 million since we began. This is the number, and this is a map. I should stay on a little bit because I think it relates to what I'm really trying to address here. Are some alternative ways of bringing mission-related capital to do what both the investor as well as the manager consider to be the mission. So you can see we've extended primarily from Eastern Europe, which are smaller countries, so they look less significant, to Asia and East Africa and to North Africa. Those are the countries we are there. One of the things that we really, out of the 800 million, about 50 million was for USAID. And NATO is, as I understand the word for profit, they call that non-negative outlay. And so when we generated non-negative outlay, we said, well, what are we going to do with this? Nobody gets their own people return to the taxpayers. So what they said is, can you think of something that won't make as much money? And what we came up with was the Center for Entrepreneurship and Executive Development, which really is there to coach in transition phase, in particular, young entrepreneurs. Many of them have never had no experience with entrepreneurship. They were either from a Congress state or from a government where very few opportunities allowed. And so for many reasons, they're growing from 5 employees to 15, 30, and they want to know how to avoid mistakes, which makes a lot of sense. You can look at that as waste, and there's a lot of productivity to pick up in the world, or it's just about human capital side. The nice thing here is we've now developed, so the 14th one, Morocco, more than 35,000 entrepreneurs that we have on our database. We've gone through programs. And this obviously gives us an opportunity to deploy technology to entrepreneurs in smaller markets. And this is trust factor. The earlier this morning, trust factor was listed as prime of the metrics, and you get this kind of presentation. I want to focus on two new forms of investment, no longer just a limited life venture capital model that was developed in the United States for buyout funds, for funds that have a very deep capital market, but would then exit almost according to schedule and provide their investors with great returns. When you're dealing with the emerging markets and frontier markets, obviously those deep capital markets don't exist. The dollar volatility in which most of these funds are cited requires you to have some flexibility in terms of finding the optimal time out. And indeed, in many cases, if the company is growing at 30%, doing everything you hope for, you have to ask yourself, why is now the right time to exit? It's just a schedule that the investors are expecting. And I understand investors don't walk away forever with some liquidity. But we try to think, well, we come up with a new model that combines flexibility of direct investment with efficiency on money. And that goes back to something Andrea was saying. When we talk about impact, my definition of impact may not be your definition of impact. Many foundations, many family office have specific ideas for what they're trying to do. It can be health, it can be education, it can be agribusiness. It can be within agribusiness, not fertilizers, but organics, or it can be something that would improve productivity depending upon the input factors. You can see what chaos there is when you really start driving down into detail. What is it that people want to do? I think the normal diversified blind pool or closed-end fund, which looks for a smart fund manager, you lock your money away for 10 years, and you ask that person or that group to make diversified investments. That doesn't speak to what a lot of impact investors or mission-related investors would like. For example, if you really care about organics, you put $2 million along $50 million from other investors, and there's one investment that's organic and there's one that's not. Have you really achieved everything with the money that you wanted to achieve? That became a dialogue for us. We began to talk with a number of our investors, particularly on the family office side, and the people who wanted impact. So what do you really want? If the 2 and 20 isn't really fixing it, what is it to do? So we came to let's count it. If you look at this menu, these are countries and sectors where CFIC had deep experience. So we're not in every country in the world, but we are in a lot of them. And we have a specific depth. About a third of our investments have been in agribusiness, but we recognize that there are distinctions. Do you want to benefit small state shareholders? Do you want an organic farming? Do you want to have just general reduction in waste? And what we've done is we've just opened up a dialogue and said, well, I like the agri, I like these guys, but what do I do with my money? And I think we can do that because we have more than 180 people globally now who are on the ground and understanding of how to make investments in these countries. And we do so in a tax efficient manner, people like animal laws, etc. But we're always looking for possibilities to have them use what was not a reduction of waste on my side. And doing so, we can actually provide a model where the investor does not have to pay a fee at all unless we find an investment that makes sense. Where the investment period is only 18 months because the prices change. We're walking into Ukraine. I think that's a good idea before the neighbors to the north that we discussed for a 10-year period. See that by the end of this presentation, everything will be in good shape. The structure so that we can develop is something which really is a cross between either a management account or a direct investment vehicle. And yet, when people try to do direct, they don't know the tax issues, they don't have the local language, and it's too expensive for them to monitor. You can't fly 9 hours for monitoring a $100,000 investment. So I think that's one form that we're really excited about. We brought in mostly family offices in this level. A number of institutions are following because there's an advantage on the cost side. If you don't pay fees until an investment is made, and if what you're really getting is audits from the individual companies and not from funds, turns out you can save a lot of fund expenses, you can save a lot of management fees, and if the end of the day, you see with the same returns like for like, the amount of money invested, you typically pick up about 50 basis points, 60 basis points versus the traditional 2 to 20 model. And I think that's something as well the case. If we don't need to waste money, say we don't waste it. We've got to be efficient with audits, we've got to be efficient with the use of money, and I think a lot of our investors are obviously happy about that. So this is the way that would allow us to do somewhat lower return investments and still provide secondary returns. Now, one other preferred structure which I think has been developed in the United States and has gone on to other countries is the holding company with a permanent capital vehicle. You could look at something like what Skull does, Capricorn, where effectively they have their own balance sheet can be invested for whatever. If they like a company like Tesla, they can be invested very small, and they can stay in Tesla 10 years later, 15 years later. If they want to do a small investment of 300,000, they can stay in that way. And it's not that no exits are changing, it's just that they are able to say, well, that capital growth needs to be there. Well, that's fine for someone like Stoll who's money. But what about these conventional investors? How can we give them the opportunity to be in growing companies and diversified structures that they still have? And that is the listed holding company or the listed permanent capital vehicle. This is happening actually much more in Europe at this stage than the U.S. Those of you may in the U.S. remember the business development corporations, which is where you would invest in companies, small businesses. There would be some kind of current return, it could be 4 or 5%. But at the end of the day, the capital gains would be reinvested. And that's how the actual purpose of the listed vehicle is going to work. This is not something that trades as frequently as Apple stock does, but it is something where market makers are interested, particularly where there's a clear impact theme that's been enunciated. That could either be by country. So you see Myanmar is an investment company in the United States in London, which has grew from 8 million pounds and has grown over time as it performed, bringing in money. INCO is an impact fund for just Africa. And we're listing our Bangladesh vehicle, which provides a diversified and high-growth portfolio in Bangladesh. A lot of people are interested in those countries, which is diaspora, and people particularly see that these countries have opportunity, and that there's no other way that they can invest in it. Each of these vehicles obviously to disclose what the vehicle is trying to do, what our own impact, both negative and positive statements are, and that those are being measured and presented. But I think what's really neat about this is that a lot of the entrepreneurs, particularly younger entrepreneurs, who in these difficult countries are completely committed to a particular company and a particular team, they're not going to be forced in 5 to 6 years to exit and to sell the company that they want. So the focus here is then more on the impact, driving the growth, driving a current return, which in the U.S. today and in Europe even more, at 2 to 4%. There's a lot of family offices saying that's good because what I'm getting in the bank is 10 basis points. But at the same time, these gains are building. I'd be very happy to talk about that later. I don't want to take all the time with the panel. And I think with that, thank you very much.
Thanks, Bert. You can see the good work they're doing around the world in so many countries, and that's why the P80 is committed to try to find different ways to have funds like Steve be able to have the capital they need to do even more. So that's why we're here today on this panel. The next speaker is William Foote, or Willy Foote. He is Senator Fulbright's grandson. He did a great job on our Fulbright panel on Monday at the plenary, where we basically are trying to activate the Fulbright network of 300,000 Fulbright alumni around the world to be partners. And we actually got into that now that our these friends are here delegation, because we had the Vietnam master speak at Clinton School. And he made the point that he was a Fulbright Scholar alumni, studied at Tufts, that the Deputy Prime Minister was a Fulbright alum, the Foreign Minister was a Fulbright alum, Kyle was with us, the Science and Technology Advisor, is a Fulbright alum. We started looking around to see if that was similar situation in other countries, and found that it was. We found there actually 5 or 6 clubs did finish with Fulbright scholars. So with that, we said we got to reach out to Willy and get him activated. We actually last evening, before the dinner, we rededicated the exhibit over the Heifer building that we hope to move over at some point to the Foote Library and Senator Fulbright, President Clinton and Senator Fulbright had a long-standing relationship. And Willy is also CEO of Group Capital, which I'll tell you about, another great vehicle for investors to put money in to do great work all over the world. Okay, hear me okay?
Yeah. Wonderful to be here. As I said last night, I guess I said a couple times yesterday, I was the only person in the room. Well, I couldn't get a Fulbright, I just am a Fulbright. Anyway, I work in sustainable agriculture and underserved markets. Founder CEO of Group Capital, and in confronting the challenges of agriculture around the globe, really we need to ask how and not if. How do we increase income for farmers working in vulnerable places? How do we fix the cruel irony that so many of the world's 500 million farm families go hungry? How do we make agriculture preserve and not destroy the planet? And I'll just, there's no silver bullet, there's a lot of silver buckshot solutions. Heifer International is doing terrific work along these lines, so I encourage everybody to go out and look at these exhibits here, because they're really wonderful. I guess what I'll say first is to put some numbers behind this. It's roughly 70% of the 2.7 billion people in the world who live on under $2 a day depend on agriculture as their primary source of income. You take sub-Saharan Africa, agriculture represents 65%, or it employs 65% of the workforce, and accounts for about 40% of GDP, but African agriculture chronically underperforms its potential. And crop yields are just a fraction of what's attainable. And it's kind of a stunning figure, but the continent imports over $35 billion in food annually because markets just aren't working very well there in the agricultural sector. And when you think about, when you think about ag, you probably imagine a woman or a man in the field tilling the soil with a hand hoe to eke out a living, and that's subsistence agriculture. And it is frustratingly persistent across Africa and much of the world. But with greater access to inputs like seed and fertilizer and technology and training and capital and markets, that man, that woman can become part of a complex and exciting value chain, one that goes well beyond the narrow focus on farming, to become a driver of industrial transformation. And from value-added processing to cold storage to all sorts of infrastructure that's required to ensure food gets from the farm to the consumer. So I guess my point is, and this applies to so much of the work at Heifer International as well, agriculture is particularly well suited to technological innovation and entrepreneurial development. If we support agriculture, like we do so many other sectors, we can replace the image of the impoverished farmer working the land with one of high-impact businesses that enable farmers to earn decent living, to feed local populations, and really become the economic backbone of entire country. So in that context, just quickly, Group Capital, what's our buckshot? We are investing and supporting and accelerating the growth of agricultural businesses in Africa, Latin America, and Indonesia. So our purpose is to increase income, stabilize employment, create jobs for these farmers. So we provide kind of a unique combination of access to capital and trade partners, business skills, and environmental training, all so that these businesses can grow. And these businesses are collecting and processing the farmers' crops. They're linking growers to local markets and international markets. And as they grow, they really become engines of impact. Farmer incomes rise, food security improves, women get their fair share, ecosystems are sustained, young people, this is important because you have a hollowing out of youth in the countryside in Africa, for instance. Young people have an opportunity to lead through these agricultural businesses. So for us, it's really ultimately about how do you unlock entrepreneurship where it matters most in many of these markets, which is in agriculture, and in particular at the end of the dirt road in the hardest to serve markets. So these are palm oil, sustainable palm oil production in Ghana, which we support. So just quickly in terms of kind of how we structure ourselves, we are 501c3. We're very much a blended kind of finance play. We have roughly 135 people. We have staff in 13 countries. We have 4 key hub offices, one in San Jose, Costa Rica, one in Lima, one in Nairobi, one in Dakar, Senegal. We're kind of a mini United Nations as a team. About a third of our team is in Cambridge and Boston, where I'm based, and the rest are in the field. And I'll say one thing I'm very proud of is that we don't have a single expat in Africa. It's entirely an African team, and we have 2 expats in Latin America, and they're both Europeans. So the partnership, what is it? It's basically we lend capital in the absence of a bank or a banking sector that's going to take the risk in ag. And so the challenges these businesses fall into what's called missing middle. Too large for microfinance, still too small, too risky, too remote for the banks, and so they just can't access capital that they need to grow the operation or purchase from more farmers, employ more workers, produce more nutritious foods. So we're trying to fill that missing middle, and we'll provide, it's all debt, unlike seed, we're providing debt financing, and we will provide working capital to make sure the farmers are paid on time. We'll invest in a processing facility or whatever infrastructure is required to add value, capture more benefits for local communities. More recently, as fungal diseases and other things tied to climate change are decimating certain crops, we're financing at very long-term, 7+ years, refurbishment of farms with disease-resistant varietals, etc. And then we're working in about 30 value chains. About 50% is still coffee, but from there it's cocoa and cashew and quinoa. And the last 4 years we've had a big focus on local supply chains for rising domestic consumption of nutritious foods. So that takes us into an agro-processor in Burkina Faso that might be buying millet or sorghum and then milling that into flour and then micro-fortifying that product to sell into local markets. In addition to lending, we also provide advisory services, in particular financial management training. Think of it as like a mini MBA in finance for business leaders. And this is like understand your cash flows, how can you apply for a loan, how do you manage it successfully once you receive the financing. I love this photograph. This is a woman in the Western Mountains of Guatemala. She has a child on her back, and she is proudly showing her cash flow model to other business leaders in the region. More recently, last 3 years, we've opened the aperture because it's necessary. Much of it is through alliances as opposed to our own team, but providing training on mobile technology designed for the farmer enterprise, for instance, digitization of internal on-farm inspections to bring big data analytics to your agronomic practices. We've been working in environmental training through improving agronomic practices themselves, and then also we have The Way, which is the Women in Agriculture initiative, where we focus on strategies to increase economic participation of women in local communities. I won't go into detail here. You see we've got a footprint. We're in roughly 25 countries with a real kind of sub-geographic focus on East Africa, on West Africa, Northern Latin America, and South America. We just started in Indonesia about 1.5 years ago. We are a hybrid capital beast, which is to say, you might have picked up on this, we operate in an environment that is really kind of, you might say, the gray area between the 2 traditional poles of government-led and business-led solutions. These are very broken markets, and there's real risk. So we have a notes program where we issue paper like a bank. We have about $100 million in debt from 230 note holders. Many of them are foundations, Ford Foundation, Gates, etc. More are family office and high net worth individuals. OPIC, John was up here, Simon earlier. We have our biggest investor is OPIC. They're in at 20 now, but they've improved the line up to 50 million. So it's kind of a wonderful blend of impact debt, if you will, which returns a whopping roughly 2% coupon. But as Bert said, that's not terrible when you're getting your kind of position as a fixed income, low friction, very high impact product. But it only works, we only put that debt to work because we raised first need off balance sheet, we have some, but we basically, for every $1 we raise in philanthropy, we leverage $4 with debt, and then we turn around and on-lend that to the farmers in the field. So if you look at this quick model here, on the left side, $1 million in net assets or operating support leverages $5 billion in lending capital. Typically, say for trade finance loan, we represent 35% of the sales. So that gets you $14 million, and then on average, our clients pay through to the farmers 80% of the top line. So it's roughly $11 million in commerce. Money paid to farmers off the back of $1 million in philanthropy. We're probably an overperforming NGO versus an underperforming bank. But we're very unapologetic about mixing capital, very accountable, high traceability or transparency, public subsidy from philanthropy or government dollars, blended with private capital to go where angels truly fear to tread. The last couple slides. Last year we loaned roughly $155 million to just shy of 300 businesses that aggregate roughly 500,000 farm households. So about 2.5 million people if you include the family members. Those businesses generated about $1.2 billion in revenue with 80% paid through to the farmers. That's about $980 million in income for farmers. And that's pretty good leverage, but as I said, it's just silver buckshot. My last slide here is I'll say, Omidyar recently, last year, published a frontier capital kind of framework. And the thing I highlight here is the addressable market, kind of asset, light, proven business models in middle income markets, maybe sliding scale down to lower income, is kind of that first range. That's where most VC and frontier markets is going. Then you get to frontier, you get out to frontier plus. When you get to beyond frontier, which is about 75% of our clients, the farmers are less than $2.50 a day. Asset heavy, right? Old school bricks and mortar businesses, lots of assets, input financing, production financing. This is the challenge that we face around roughly 1/4 of the world's population that simply aren't getting by because they lack access to clean water, electricity, medicine, basic education, nutritious foods. That's where we need to think about impact investing, but with highly segmented impact. And the truth is, in our experience, and I believe in our market, there are real trade-offs between risk-adjusted market returns and impact. If you want to go in pre-commercial market conditions and really solve some of these deepest problems, yes, you can get full risk-adjusted market returns in some places, but not necessarily in this place. But boy, oh boy, isn't it great if you can wash your face with 75% of your fully loaded cost with the yield of your portfolio. In other words, return 75 cents on the dollar when in the past. Beyond Frontier has been almost entirely a philanthropic arena. So thanks very much. Thank you, Bill.
My goal was to get your fund to go to $1 billion from $100 million. Imagine what you could do Bert as well. So we're now ready to Tom Mitchell, who actually advises some of these foundations on different investment structures and things, Cambridge Associates, and Tom, would you tell a little about Cambridge and your ideas?
Sure, thanks Mark, and thanks everyone. It's wonderful to be here. And I joined Cambridge Associates about 10 years ago, and I'll tell you a bit more about Cambridge, but it's great to be sitting next to Willy and Bert, because when I was in graduate school, at the time I spent before graduate school, I was living in emerging markets, and some of my first impact investment experiences came investing in small, medium-sized enterprises in Central America, and the power and the potential impact of well-allocated private capital into these enterprises is untold, and also the challenges of empowering and enabling those enterprises is certainly steep, and so it's great to be around people that have thought deeply about what matters and to echo some of the things Andrea said about really understanding that local presence and the local situation. In fact, I think a lesson learned from us in Central America was trying to take an American-style venture capital model to small and medium-sized enterprises where equity wasn't what they needed, nor something they wanted to share. And debt probably would have been more appropriate. Some of the things we were doing and investing in, I think that's a key lesson learned that we can all carry forward as we think about some of these structures here today. So Cambridge Associates founders really did a lot of research around the endowment investing model for Harvard, and a lot of our first clients were some of the biggest college endowments here in the U.S., then ultimately foundations, and one of our first family investors was also a big dynastic family here in the U.S. So our two co-founders hit the gold mine as far as building their client base, and over the course of that time, I think we've been seen as purveyors of a lot of things we talked about today, both the traditional private equity and venture capital fund investing model, some traditional or more conventional thinking around asset allocation and portfolio management. And as we've expanded with these 1,000 clients globally, this includes some of the sovereign wealth funds that we talked about today. About 2/3 of our clients are institutional, so a lot in the endowment foundation space and overseas, some of these bigger clients. When I joined the firm, it's at the same period 10 years ago. That's when the Mission Investors Exchange, since we first heard from Melanie, they were really gaining a lot of momentum and forming a tight group of like-minded foundations who said, look, we need to think more, we need to be more thoughtful and more active in how we align our capital with our foundation's mission and trying to pursue impact. It's a great privilege of mine to be working with the Rockefeller Foundation, who's been thinking about this for more than 2 decades and putting their money to work here in Arkansas. But there were a lot of foundations like Winthrop Rockefeller at the time saying, advisors don't get it. They're keeping us in these calcified frameworks and thinking about traditional ways to manage money, and they're not helping us make money. They're not helping us do the things we want to do with our capital to be an optimal foundation, if you will. I saw when we had hand raising earlier, a lot of people are raising money. For those of you in the room that are raising capital, I'm often seen as a gatekeeper for people who want to raise capital. And that's important. Our clients look for us to maintain a sober and rigorous diligence approach to helping them make capital allocation decisions. However the world has evolved, Cambridge has evolved. When I joined the firm, we had these clients saying, we had a small group that were involved with the Mission Investors Exchange saying, Cambridge, you need to do something about this. You need to be better at helping people do mission investing. So we had 5 of us come together. In fact, I got to meet Willy in an office about 9 years ago when we still had just 5 of us. Try to figure out who was inside a giant global advisory firm. We get the data to work, we get the right information, we're getting involved in a lot of other projects which don't look like some of the things that we normally look at. And how do we make sense of these? How do we talk to our clients about them, and how do we help them invest? Today we have 35 people who are helping our clients invest like that, and we're leveraging over 200 people on the research side to find deals. So to give you some perspective of the growth of the mission investing market, we had, of these 1,000 clients, we have 150 today that are investing for mission and seeking impact. That's about a 3x expansion over the last decade. From just a traditional fund standpoint, we have over 1,000 funds that are over half of those in the private equity venture capital markets and the rest in public markets where people are seeking alignment with their mission and impact. And that's, again, over a 3x increase in the amount of funds that we saw 10 years ago. I think that there are often great misunderstandings about what we're talking about here. When we put a name like mission investing or impact investing on something, the significant risk is thinking that that's something different. This is investing. I like to say it's investing, but it's harder. And why it's harder? Because it requires you to roll up your sleeves and really think about some serious problems. So Willy just described the hybrid model and approach. Know that to enable the enterprises in which he's capitalizing and investing, it's a lot more than just providing the capital, but it's thinking about their supply chains, the value chains, how they're operating, how they execute. So similarly, from an impact investing advisory standpoint, we need to be able to dig a lot deeper than just talking to them as we would your more conventional venture capital fund manager, if you will. It's not inferior. I think that if anything, people become a bit complacent and lazy. This is just Tom Mitchell opinion. But by looking at impact and thinking through mission alignment, it takes us to many different levels of assessment of an idea and helps our clients make a really informed decision about what's going to be optimal for them. And ultimately, I think we arrive at a better, more informed decision in doing that. Beyond that, it's important, and frankly, it's a little bit, for me, it's more fun than the conventional work. 1,000 clients, we think at the firm level, globally, we look at some of the mega trends that have already been discussed here today. I mean, there are 4 in particular that are critical. Climate change, it's having a huge impact across industries. It raises both risks. We saw nice maps of what sea level rise could do, and we talked about real estate can affect physical property, but there's a lot of both direct and indirect risks that come with climate change. Demographics are changing. You know, it's projected that by 2050 we'll have close to 10 billion people here on Earth. I think someone called it overpopulation earlier. We just call it growing population. We have to figure out how to house and feed those people, give them a good livelihood. The rate and the pace of change and innovation is incredible. And most people base their assumptions on an existing model, and they don't realize the curves at which can increase rapidly as innovation and change increase. So the cost of today in the U.S. or developed market of starting a company is much lower than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago by many multiples. When we get into emerging markets, you do have to understand the systemic challenges that exist and some of the structural challenges and the additional costs that may be there. And then, of course, policy and regulatory change. And then we look globally, we see inequality stressing the system. And it creates risk to our investments. We've seen, I think, a bit of attachment from certain liquid financial markets from what's happening on the ground in other markets. And there's real opportunities from your portfolio level. Earlier today, we kicked off, Albert talked about quantitative easing in a low interest rate environment. That sort of financial repression has made capital cheap, but it's also created some risk in the public market. So we see impact investing as a way to enter private markets and actually avoid some public market risk and get the returns. So let me stop. Let me tie this back into a few things. So what our investors are looking to do ultimately, to go back to Andrea's alliteration, I think is we think of 3 Ps. It's important for you to understand as an institutional investor or a family office your purpose, your priorities, and your principles. And as advisors, we need to be able to help people articulate that. And that sometimes is easier said than done. But that really helps shape your strategy and your decision criteria for capital allocation. It's not that hard. It's actually quite simple, but sometimes it just takes a time investment to get there. And our clients are asking themselves, where I think conventionally, and again with 1,000 clients, we have some clients that still think this way, there is a historical separation between your financial investment capital and the philanthropic side of the house with your foundation. So where we work with our 150 clients that are pursuing mission investing, is thinking of how we take those barriers down and how we better integrate decision making. And that ultimately leads to better optimal capital allocation. So if you're looking at something like a root capital, or just in general in an emerging market or inefficient or something in an area that needs help, sometimes grant capital may be the most effective use of providing an enterprise working capital to develop a system. And something you can then follow up with working capital. Willy describes something that's been quite common in this space where large foundations have been quite generous and come in and take a supported position, either through equity or junior debt, to absorb first losses on investments. And that's critical, and it needs to continue and facilitate creating structures that draw capital and make people comfortable coming in with a lower risk. At the same time, it's not rational. So my sort of dream is maybe when we come back together in 10 years, that model is more rare. And we're seeing more people fighting over that junior position because they want the higher return and they understand the risks a lot better. The other thing that we're seeing is most people, because of just a conventional approach to investor endowment, this has already come out through this morning's conversations quite clearly, and Bert highlighted it between the 2 and 20 model. People think of a traditional limited partnership structure with a 10-year life that forces a trading of your asset of the enterprise. But more increasingly, our clients, both institutional and family office, are thinking about different ways to approach the investments. So it could be through a holding company. It could be through just joining with a smaller group of investors and forming a special purpose vehicle. It could be through, and let me move to my other slide here. Sometimes, I think a lot of people think just to invest directly in an enterprise is attractive. I would say that depends on your capacity to do that. If you have the skills in-house, usually some larger foundations or family offices have staff on board that have experience in the sectors and are willing to take board seats. Other times it maybe makes sense to co-invest alongside a manager. Others, they're looking at, we've highlighted some of the other things up here. All this to say, there are a variety of ways to get at the problem. I think the biggest barriers that people face are not thinking there's enough time to think through it. And so you really do have to allocate time. If there's any cost or any haircut you take on your performance, it's measured in time right now. That's the one thing it's uncertain, but it's worth it. So I'm going to stop there. I could go on, but I hope I'll let us keep moving on so you can hear from Andy.
Clean up matter, thank you, is the Bando with Heifer International, which has their headquarters here in Little Rock, outside of a very large office at the Washington, D.C. area, and operations all over the world, as you will hear. So take it away. Thanks.
Thank you. And thanks, everyone. I think coming at the tail end of a series of presentations has an advantage, which in this case is very good. Of course, establishes the fact that we have an important view that I'd like to show. Some of the very same principles that you are looking for have adopted, and because of our global footprint, I think we have some real exciting, very country-specific, community-specific options that we are looking at, which I think will be a good way to sort of show you the kinds of opportunities that do exist. But as has been said repeatedly, I think the whole notion that you can apply sort of the traditional investment principles and jump in is, that's clearly not the case. As you might expect, that's our biggest challenge, is how do we look at specific opportunities in specific communities and bring them up the scale, as it were. And so I'd like to go into starting with what our mission is. Our mission simply is to empower the disadvantaged, increase economic opportunity, and sustain global resource and natural resource and growth. So, which again, what we do is work in, at this point, over 49 countries, 220 different projects. As you can see, a clear focus on some of the very countries we're talking about. A fair number of projects in North America itself, as was just explained out of our headquarters here. We focus quite a bit on the U.S. Small communities, disadvantaged communities, reservations, and others. But more importantly, the work that I do, I think, from my perspective, I work globally. Our projects are scattered throughout Central and South America. A big emphasis in East and West Africa, and then, of course, Asia. What we look at is working with communities to essentially identify technologies, as was mentioned earlier, the whole notion that you can increase productivity by looking at appropriate technologies and customizing them for the communities and the very usage that we would like to focus on. So what we find is things such as clean cook stoves, solar chillers, solar water pumps. You see a lot of emphasis on the clean energy side of things, as statistics are very evident. You have a whole set of issues related to energy access. And we work in communities that, because of either economic situations, there are islands in that you cannot get energy to them. Or there are actually islands, such as in Indonesia, where you can have all kinds of development, but you're never going to get the grid to them. And in a lot of instances, there are islands because of the terrain. In many parts of Africa, you have serious infrastructure issues. So we work very closely with communities in mini-grid, off-grid situations, introducing the technologies that you see up there. So there's a big emphasis on what I consider looking at a household and trying to see how we can get that household from not having basic access to energy and clean water, providing them with the technology solutions. But often, as was mentioned, technology is just the beginning. That's usually the easiest part in a lot of ways. Even to customize it to specific needs, that's not difficult. What's really difficult is the fact that you have people that do not have access to the basic credit. They do not have access to basic organizations that allow them to pick up a particular technology, use it, go to others for basic simple repair and upkeep, and of course entrepreneurship. That's a big deal. So because we're all obviously committed to working in communities and people to improve their livelihoods. It's not just enough to give them access to energy, you need to use that energy for purposes. So that's really where we're at. So we're looking at things such as the ones that I mentioned up there. And then we have another big emphasis on just access to quality, potable water, as well as quantity. We work a lot with agricultural communities, that being sort of the legacy of the Winthrop Foundation, productive agriculture. So we do a lot of work within that context. And so as you can see there, the whole idea of sort of looking at the appropriate technologies and then how you match them up with investment opportunities. So the idea that you have technology companies, solution providers, work with them, work with financial institutions, institutions such as yours, the kinds of modalities that you're working on, that's exactly the kind of thing you do, and looking at grassroots businesses. When you mentioned that in your slide, the fact that these are the folks that really need that jump up. And so the way I look at it a lot of times is that if you look at it from a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being your traditional investing, a lot of the work we're doing is in that range of how do we take those folks and those institutions and communities that are at the 4, 5 level and bring them up to the 7 and 8 level. And by that I mean how do you introduce them to the appropriate technology, appropriate organizational skills, appropriate entrepreneurial skills, and bringing them up with enough financing so that then you guys can take over. And that's kind of where we're looking at these investment opportunities. So I'll give you one example, or I'll try to give you a couple of examples. One of the things that we're looking at, for example, is accelerating commercial sales of solar water pumps. What we typically find is solar water pumps, if introduced, can be extremely productive. You're looking at farmers that are operating on 2 acres in that range. If they're using any water at all for irrigation, it is from hand pumps. Very ineffective, very time consuming. So a simple product like a solar water pump can really improve their productivity. It actually is more efficient because you do not have to, you can appropriately time when you irrigate as opposed to in a hand pump situation where you have, not only are you spending a lot of time, pumping up the water, but you're actually having to release it right then and there. And of course, for those that do not have access to irrigation of that nature, they're relying on rainfall. So here we are working very closely with farmers, but we find initially that there's a lot of, there's a huge lack of awareness of the benefits of solar water pumps. There's a lack of assessment of the quality of the pumps. And so this goes hand in hand. If the farmer is somehow convinced to buy a pump that then fails, well, that's the end of that story, because not only is that farmer not going to go back, but a whole community is not going to be using. So it's very important to get it right the first time. Insufficient credit. So we're looking at farmers, as I said, that are not able to buy something that is essentially $200 to $250 depending on the size of the pump. On the supply side of things, we find that there is a lack of aggregated orders for these solar water pumps, so no supplier wants to enter the market because there just isn't enough scale. And so that's a big limitation there. Then of course there are a whole bunch of issues related to the upkeep and maintenance of the farms, of the particular pumps once they have been sold. So what we try to do is we take those kinds of barriers, as it were, and use things like demonstration of the potential of solar water pumps, assessing the products themselves, and sort of training, capacity building in that context, assist financial institutions to create loan products, and on the supply side, look at things like aggregating demand from agribusinesses so that you have scale. So that's the middle column there is what we do, and we're working currently, for example, with DuPont, with Caves, which is in East Africa, a USA-funded program that we partner with, and so we're working very extensively in several countries in East Africa, as well as in Ghana and Nigeria. We're also working in Asia, in Nepal and Indonesia, just on this particular set of issues. So that the idea here is that there are several investment opportunities along the lines that you were talking about earlier, where you can have loan capital guarantees, equity infusions, etc. And our role as we see it is to take farmers from the barriers, help them, and sort of try and create a market so that investors can step in. This is an area that we're looking at, and I'll give you an example of the kinds of numbers you might be thinking about in just one country, where, again, I won't read through the numbers, but you can see the whole idea there is, and the purpose there is important, is that farmer credits for SWPs working specifically with local financial institutions, marry them with appropriate international partners. The kinds of investments we're looking at are listed there to give you an idea of the kinds of impact we expect. About roughly a little over 2,000 solar water pumps that we hope to get used in kind of investments. So this is just something that we're working on currently. I will give you another one in Nepal, very similar thing. Again, the numbers are right there for you. The idea would be to use the kind of monies, in this case, $600K, to give the kinds of loans that we're talking about in the right. In Nepal in particular, we find that we are able to work very well with commercial banks. Nepal itself has a law that asks commercial banks to set aside certain percentages of their loans for impact investment. Clearly, what ended up happening initially, they faced the problems that I was outlining before. They could not find the right scale. They could not go out to those individual farmers that would, if they could, borrow $200. Of course, they didn't have equity, so the bank would not be interested. We've been working for the last decade or so to create these institutions, work through cooperatives, so that the cooperatives can get concessional rates from the commercial banks, turn around, and the members can avail the credit. The cooperatives then collect the payments back, and every 3 months they pay back the money to the commercial bank. It's a win-win for everyone concerned, because in this case, the cooperative itself is using the difference in rates to finance its day-to-day operations. There's training involved, assessments involved, and we stand by and work with them to build up their capacity over the years. So this is sort of an extension of that kind of work. And I'll stop there. Any questions? But as you can see, there's a lot of interest and a lot of ability to leverage the kind of work that you're doing into the project that you guys said.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. I think we have time for a couple of questions. If we have folks that would like to ask a question. Sure. Yep.
Hi all. My name is Andrea. Sparrow. I'll be on the next panel. So your answer may be featured on the next panel. The question is to all of you. So all of you touch essentially portfolio portfolios of solutions and practitioners in your work, whether you manage direct investments, advise your clients on them, manage funds. What are you, or you're vetting them, as in the case of Winthrop. What are any or all of you doing to mobilize your practical knowledge and share it with other practitioners, other investors, to make it easy to discover, repurpose, measure, aggregate, and finance these solutions at a larger scale?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I guess first thing I'll say is, for us, it's not so much about, as root capital, going from the billions to the trillions, or even the millions to the billions. It's about our end game is replication and adoption by other institutions. And it could be that bank in Nepal, before the government created, in effect, what probably sounds like a small business administration incentives to support smallholder agricultural small business. But so the question, the imperative is, how do you blueprint and how do you disseminate that knowledge? So one very concrete example we have is we like the term of pathological collaboration. And so we work with our peer institutions, aka competitors, largely in Europe. We created what's called the Council on Smallholder Agricultural Finance, or CSAF. And there are 9 of us. It includes Rabobank and Triodos, who have sidecar funds, kind of like Root Capital, and there are a number of others. And we basically are working together to create standards and practices around responsible lending, around customer or consumer protection, around, most importantly, social and environmental due diligence in addition to enterprise and financial due diligence. So I think that's an example of, we need to go beyond our own parochial kind of institutional boundaries and figure out how you disseminate in a way that can go viral. And the only one other one I'll mention is ANDI, which is the Network of Development Entrepreneurs. We're a founding member of that. I've been on the executive committee for about 8 years. And it's another kind of example of a block or an industry block coming together to be able to advocate with smart kind of influence strategies with very concrete agenda with specific stakeholders in mind, USAID or the county government, whatever, to advocate. In our case, which is in effect what we do, is kind of what the SBA does in the United States, only you have no government scaffolding or coffers to be able to actually provide the support to make agriculture thrive in rural Arkansas.
Great question.
As we're looking at agriculture, I think we're an SEC registered advisor, and so we have certainly, anything that we do, we have to make sure that there's adequate control and transparency if we are associated with it. So one of the ways that we believe to leverage this 28 years of experience is we've begun joint venturing or working with new teams on the ground. So in Sri Lanka, for example, Algeria, these are the 2 most recent ones. But in each of those cases, our system still has to be there. We still have to have control in terms of the reporting, in terms of the actual investment decisions. But a lot of work then to train. These are countries that never had private equity in any form at all. So Nigeria, Colombia, I mentioned a little earlier, was the first one. The other thing, something that people have mentioned here, is this is very difficult stuff in what we do. I mean, we're looking at a small scale with a model that is built for large funds, 2% on a $30 million fund, obviously making a lot less management fees than 2% on a $1 billion fund. And I think our investors are used to that kind of model. So up until now, we've really been focusing hard on training our own people, and certainly participating in some of the forum and the conferences like this. We've worked with many business schools who bring their interns over who are very interested. One of the trends that's very positive, looking at the millennials, is how many of them are really interested in doing impact in some way. They don't want to just work for a big investment bank. They really want to see what they're doing at the time. But it's a big issue, and the older I get, it's a bigger issue, because what's going to happen, right? So some of the things that we can encourage the consortiums to write manuals, to teach courses. I hope we get to that. I think so far it's still too busy to keep going.
Mark, I got 30 seconds answer for you. So earlier, actually, I see Carol with her way up. She mentioned quartiles of performance around traditional funds. So Cambridge Associates defines that. We over our 45-year history, we have rich data a history of private markets. So we've taken that same reputation and just we've applied that. We've collaborated over the last year with the Global Impact Investing Network to create an impact investing benchmark. So it's currently small. It's growing. It's going to be very robust and informative over the coming years. So far, there's about 60 funds in it, 25 of which are in the emerging markets. So it's you can go on our website. It's publicly available. We also have taken we have a history of clean tech investments at the deal level. So not just looking at the fund manager level, but we've looked through, and currently it's over 1,400 individual deals in clean tech investments we've tracked since 2000 about. And that's also publicly available on the same site. So if you go to CambridgeAssociates.com, there's a research tab. You can pull this and you can look through, and we've subdivided it. And it's been helpful because for many people, clean tech had a bad rap. They thought of really capital-intensive equity investments that didn't do well in the great financial crisis. But when you actually look across 16 different subsectors of it, you actually see that there's some great information, and some of them were covered quite nicely. So investors want information, they want data, they want, so we're trying to provide that out. And then if you want to read essays and thought pieces, we write that's there too.
And just quickly, for Winthrop, we also find that we work very closely as a result of our in-country work with the decision makers and policy makers within countries. And as was mentioned earlier, the policies and regulations and the appropriate blending of those with incentives is very important to create the market. So we find as we work in communities, we typically will work with the national and subnational governments to create the appropriate policy. We're doing that, for example, in Indonesia, Nepal, Kenya, Tanzania, at least a dozen countries where, in Vietnam, for example, we're writing, helping draft the appropriate regulations, guidelines, and the appropriate market mechanisms, which then translates into better implementation and a more sort of enabling, better enabling environment. And I think that's a key element of what we should be done in this case.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue. Our panelists, who I think will be here this afternoon, we can visit with them one-on-one. We're going to take just a minute here because we're about halfway through the combined proceedings of the Club Madrid P80 and the Global Solutions Summit. And so I want to show you something just quickly. So what we're actually in the process of doing, and that is to implement the agreement that was signed between the Club of Madrid and the P80 group. And we're doing that because there needs to be a center where all this activity continues and the staff can actually help coordinate all of the different groups that are here and others that have participated previously. So we're actually creating an institution called the Global Solutions Institute, which Charles Morgan, one of our co-chairs, described at the plenary session on Monday. I'll show you a few slides quickly of what we're going to be doing. We'll be basically raising the money to do this during 2017. And the reason we're doing it is you got emerging middle class, when everybody in India and China wants a car and air conditioners, it's going to be a big demand on things. And there's more and more people every day, which the last slide showed. So there could be meeting shortages of energy, water, food, the environment, medical services. But as we've been discussing throughout all of our proceedings, the deployment of proven technologies can help clean and conserve water, efficiently produce, store, manage energy, clean and protect the environment, produce and distribute food more efficiently, and provide medical services and public safety. And how do we connect those? We need an institute that will do that. And we initially called this Global Technology Expo for Deployment Demonstration, which was still within that expo, but now it's a bigger operation, which is the Global Solutions Institute. It's a unique thing because this isn't something somebody just brought out of a turnip truck and decided to do something like this. It arose very deliberately between the discussions with President Madrid, the 115 former presidents and prime ministers, and the P80 group that we talked about earlier. And now we've got others involved, like initial investors and Fulbright Group. There was created a task force to implement this, and that's what we're going to expand. And what makes it unique is there's several technology parks, and 240 technology parks around the United States working to develop technologies. There's not one focused on deployment of technologies. And so that's the others. Also, there's not really a center that tells the story of who's doing what to solve global problems. What is food capitalism? What is seeds doing? What is foundations doing? What's no center focused on pulling together the problem-solving network of existing organizations, and that's what's so important. You mentioned Andy, the Aspen Institute group that many of you are members of. That's an existing organization. We're talking to them about once somebody like Winthrop uses the technology, they then share that with the other 40 members. And to do that, we have to have staff, and we have to have fund that staff. And so, but they're all existing organizations like the Mission Investment Organization. So we're focused on the deployment, and the way look familiar to you, it's right outside here. We had the Global Solutions Summit at the State Department in 2014, which I mentioned, which Al Watkins was the chair of and organized. And that really helped to build the momentum for all of this. I always tell people, one of the most interesting people I've ever met was Prince Charles' representative. His name was James Bond. He was from London. And he fascinating guy, but anyway. So you have to have the financing, and you have to have the sales channel. So the PA component, what we're talking about today, is the financing. The sales channels could be Heifer International, which is in 40 countries. And if they deploy that technology and save 70% of the fuel on the diesel generator, they're introducing that technology to the country. And some smart entrepreneur in that country is going to say, "Can I be the distributor for that technology because of what's other generators in my country?" Or the solar irrigation pumps, or the other technologies we're talking about. So we have three components to this. One is the development world component, which we spent a lot of time talking about today. But we also have a cities, tribal area, and island state component. So we're working with ALOSIS, the Alliance of Small Island States, 42 island states. And they want to get involved in this. They have needs for similar technologies that cities have, like waste disposal, water purification, that sort of thing. And then the corporate sustainability. Mars Clinton School panel will deal with corporate sustainability. You'll have the head of finance for Citibank for sustainability. He's got a mandate to invest $100 billion over the next 10 years in sustainable projects all over the world. You're going to have the head of the sustainability consortium, which is 100 major corporations from Walmart to Dow, Chemical to Campbell Soup, and all of what they're doing to try to be more sustainable. So that's another key component, because corporations can drive this, because if Walmart lets their suppliers have a water purification system for the tannery in Vietnam, that tells the company in Vietnam acquire the technology to meet the requirement that Walmart's putting on them, because Walmart shareholders are putting it on Walmart. So one of the things, we're doing this in phases. One of the things we want to really have is a foundation and NGO museum that will tell the story of what all these organizations are doing, and not just tell the story, but so they'll know what each other is doing, and they're less reinventing the wheel. Number one. Number two, they'll know that they have the appropriate technologies to do their work in the most efficient way. So that's really the purpose of this facility. There's no such facility today. But frankly, you can't go anywhere to see what the product goes back there. Maybe you should go to your office. But anyway, then the Global Solutions Institute is our first new building, which will be actually back here.
Yeah, that's true.
That's our site. So if you just orient yourself, the building right here is the building you're in. That's the headquarters, that's the Clinton School where we were yesterday, that's the Clinton Library where we'll be tonight. And we have plenty of room to do this, actually on both sides of the river here. That's the complex. Phase one is really to take this island and put some island appropriate technologies like microgrid system, make it self-contained island with appropriate water filtration technologies. We've just completed the construction of a bridge to the island, and we actually, if you go down there today, you'll see some pictures of some of the technologies that will actually be out on that island, some companies that are here. This is again where we are right now. That's the Global Solutions Institute, that's the Library Museum Complex, that's a permanent expo hall at the American Council for Renewable Energy, which has a trade show every year with all those technologies, and you're saying just leave the exhibits up the rest of the year. Those are buildings for things like finance, and then this is going to be pavilions from about 30 countries to showcase both technology. France wants to show technologies from France, but some of the other countries like Rwanda will show some projects that are happening in Rwanda. And so this is the island complex is phase A. We're also working with Heifer to put exhibits in the building we're in now out there. That is pretty quick. You see a taste of some of those exhibits out there today. And then there's an island component. That's sort of more what you'll see on the island component, aquaculture, weather system housing, cell phone banking, and so forth. This is the building right out here we're talking about, the technology lab. That's looking at it from the other side, back towards our side of the river. It's about a $250 million project, and we're going to launch it, the fundraising component for that next 2017. We actually have an offer of a developer that should build one of the buildings for us, so that's about $10 million already. So anyway, it's going to be busy, Charles, as we move out to accomplish this goal. We want all of you to know that there will be a center, and the center will have all the tools we need to try to accomplish what we're trying to do, mobilize the full-right network, mobilize the VA, mobilize efficient investors, and then obviously we have satellites of this in many cities and countries around the world. So it's an ambitious goal, but people who know people who want to support this, they won't take us straight. So we're going to pursue it, and we're excited about it. We need your help and your support, your actions, and definitely need to be a part of it. So thank you very much.